Alright, today we're going to be looking at density, so we're going to go over what is density, and then we're going to look at how to calculate density. So when you're looking at density, it's going to be how much matter it contains. And you can say it's going to be the mass per unit of volume. When you're looking at density, the more the particles are packed together, the higher the density is going to be. The less the particles are in proximity to one another, the less dense it's going to be. So if you're looking at a forest and there's a whole lot of trees, then you say it's very dense. Where if you're looking at an area that has less trees, then it's going to be less dense. So you can think about density of how proximity it is to one another. If you have more stuff pushed together, it's going to be denser, whereas if you have more space between them, it's going to be less dense. Now when you're looking at your density, your SI units, it's going to be grams per centimeter cubed or grams per milliliter. And there's going to be times where they're going to ask you if something's going to sink or float based on you knowing that the density of water is going to be 1 gram per milliliter. So therefore, when you're looking at something's going to sink or float, if it's greater than 1, it's going to sink. If your object's density is less than 1, then it's going to float. So that's one way to determine if something's going to sink or float. Now, when you are looking at solving these problems, alright, your steps to solving are the following. And you're going to use these steps over and over again throughout the trimester when you get a new equation. So first thing is to list the variables. Your second thing is to write original equation. Your third thing is to write your equation. And what I mean by your equation, I mean that you have the numbers substituted into the equation. You are then going to solve, and you're going to write the answer to at least the nearest hundredth. And then you're going to write the unit. And then finally you're either going to circle or highlight your answer with unit. Okay, so those are steps you're going to take each and every single time. So when you're looking at it, what it's going to look like is this. I listed my variables, so what information was in the problem. I wrote my original equation. I substituted my numbers in. I solved, I got my answer. I put my unit at the end. And then in this case, instead of circling, I squared it, but I accentuated what the answer is going to be. So that's the steps you're going to take for every single problem. Now you'll see on the density worksheet here, some of it already did this step for you. Okay, so that step's done. So you just have to do this step over here. But some of them, they didn't do the steps, so you have to do all these steps to get your credit. So when I start looking at your quizzes and worksheets, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking for all your work to be shown there. Okay, so that's the steps you're going to take. So we're going to go over some examples of how to do density, and we're also going to start filling in your formula sheet for density. So number one here is going to be your density. So density equals mass divided by volume. Mass equals density times volume. And volume equals mass divided by density. Now in your notes is where we put what each variable means. So D is density, M is mass, and V is volume. For density, it's grams per centimeter cubed or grams per milliliter. For mass, it's grams, and for volume, it's centimeters cubed or milliliters. Alright, so you should have this written as your first formula on your formula sheet there. And you want to keep this formula because it keeps everything organized for you. Now we can make a note, so we know for later, that water is equal to 1 gram per milliliter. So if they ask us a question later on, what's the density of water? We know right there, 1 gram per milliliter of water there. So we're going to look at some examples that are in your book on page 54. So our first step is to list our variables. So number 1 says, a piece of tin has a mass of 16.52 grams and a volume of 2.26 centimeters cubed. What is the density of tin? So they gave us 16.52 grams, and they told us the volume was 2.26 centimeters cubed. So we're going to solve for density, so mass divided by volume, 16.52 divided by 2.26 divided by 2.26 would give us 7.31 grams per centimeter cubed. Number 2, go ahead and just list away because we know those are our variables. A man has a 50 centimeter cubed bottle completely filled with 163 grams of a slimy green liquid. What's the density of the liquid? So we got 50 centimeters cubed for our volume, and they told us 163 grams. So in this case again, we're solving for density. So 163 divided by 50 would give you 3.26 grams per centimeter cubed. Okay, number 3. Says a piece of metal has a density of 11.3 grams per centimeter cubed and a volume of 6.7 centimeters cubed. What's the mass of this piece of metal? Alright, so we have 11.3 grams per centimeter cubed, and then they told us 6.7 centimeters cubed. So solving for mass, density times volume, 11.3 times 6.7 would give you 75.71, and then grams is your unit for mass. Okay, so you should see this as very similar setup to how you solve for most of your equations in the part A of the class here. Alright, now I'm going to go over some of the problems that are on your density worksheet. So this density worksheet is a view-only worksheet because you're going to do all these problems in your notebooks. Okay, so you're not going to be writing on the sheet or typing anything on the sheet. It's all going to be in your notebooks. So you're just going to title it Density Worksheet. So we're going to look at number 1. So it gave us 687 grams, 87 centimeters cubed. Wanted us to solve for density. So therefore, we're going to be looking at mass divided by volume. So we're going to have 687 divided by 87 to give us 7 points. That rounds that up, so we'll end up with 7.9 grams per centimeter cubed. Okay, we're going to go over here to number 6. Okay, because number 6 starts to throw people off because they gave us all these different numbers here. So if we look at number 6, we got D, L, and then we have M there. So our density, they gave us 7.3 grams per centimeter cubed. They gave us length of 7.3, width of 2, and a height of 7.7. So when you're looking at this to get your volume, you're going to do what with these three numbers? You're going to multiply. So we'll go back here on our formula sheets and we'll make a note somewhere. We'll put in parentheses, V equals length times width times height. Okay, so if they gave us those three numbers, we know we're going to be multiplying them together. Length times width times height. So our first step is to multiply together. So 7.3 times 2 times 7.7 would give me 112.42, and this would be centimeters cubed. So now I'm going to solve for mass. So density times volume, so 7.3 times 112.42, so 7.3 times 112.42 would give me 820.67 grams. Okay, now I'm going to skip down here because I showed you how to do those, but I want to skip down here to number 15. Alright, number 15. Number 15 says, when a lead sinker is placed in 13 milliliters of water and the water level rises to 18 milliliters, if the density of lead is 11.3 grams per milliliter, what is the mass? Okay, what are we going to do with these numbers? Well, first we're going to list. Told you the density is 11.3 grams per milliliter. And then it told us we have 13 milliliters and 18 milliliters. Well, that deals with volume because we have milliliters there. So another way to get a volume besides doing length times width times height is to do a method called water displacement. So you're going to see how much the water level rises from where it started to. So in this case, we're going to take our final volume, which is 18 milliliters, minus our initial volume, which is 13 milliliters. That will give us our change in volume. Okay, so let me write that in the right spot there. That should be 18 milliliters minus 13 milliliters. There we go, now it's in the right spot. Okay, so when we do that, we're going to take 18 minus 13. So for those who want to see in the calculator, 18 minus 13 would give us 5 milliliters. That's going to be our volume. So to solve for mass, density times volume, 11.3 times 5 would give you 56.5 grams for your answer. Okay? So anytime that you see a volume where they're talking about water level rising and they give you 2, that is going to be where you're going to subtract your volume in order to get, or to subtract the two numbers in order to get your volume. Okay, you're going to go back to the top, do the remainder of the worksheet, both sides. Okay, making sure that you follow all the steps that we just did here. Once you start getting into the habit, it won't take you long to do those steps. Once you get done, make sure you take that picture and then attach it to your assignment to get your points for this worksheet and notes.